Everybody, and good morning. That took a little bit longer to open up than it usually does. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Welcome back to all our familiar faces today. I know we've got a whole bunch of our favorite all-star teachers joining us. I think we've got a few new groups as well, and if you are new to us, then welcome to our program, bringing some of the coolest scientists and explorers on this planet right to your classroom for free. We are so thrilled to be having, this is our first of 5 events today. We've gone a little bit crazy. And so thank you guys for joining us as we continue showcasing these just incredible people. We got a whole bunch of groups joining us on YouTube as well. Welcome in to all of you folks. And I am so excited to get underway. Now, before we dive in with today's speaker intro, I want to note we are going to have a Kahoot together today. So between our talk and our Q&A, if you want to go to kahoot.it, separate tab on your computer, pull up that game pin, get it ready to go. We'd love to have you guys take part in what should be a very fun little quiz. I will bring up that game pin throughout the rest of our broadcast as well. Now, I am an animal behavior guy by background. I grew up with David Attenborough, Steve Irwin. I love wildlife. So much so that when the chance came to do an epic March Mammal Madness series of events back in late February, I jumped at the chance. And if you didn't check out our March Mammal Madness series of programs, they are all on our YouTube channel. Some of the coolest scientists around the world. It was a really spectacular time and a spectacular tournament through that outreach event to follow. One of my very favorite people we had on during those festivities was Dr. Alyson Brokaw, and she is a bat specialist. So we've got bear people, crocodile people, shark people, these charismatic megafauna, and a lot of people hear about bats. Think in your class right now, when you hear about bats, what do you think about? A lot of people get a little bit scared about bats. They're a little bit nervous around bats. And I have always been absolutely in love with bats. And Dr. Brokaw blows me out of the water in terms of her enthusiasm for our flying friends. And so I'm excited to dive in with her, learn about some of her research to understand and share her passion for these amazing creatures, and hopefully inspire you guys as well. So without further ado, Dr. Brokaw, thank you so much for joining us today, and take us away.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Like Jesse said, I really love talking about bats, so I am really excited to get to share just some of my favorite bat facts. Hopefully you will learn something new today, and then hopefully we'll have plenty of time to ask questions, because they're one of the wonderful things about bats, but also the hard to present thing is there's just so much amazing things to talk about that I am never able to get through all of them. So we will go ahead. I do have a little presentation set up, and let me get that going.
Beautiful.
All right. How does that look?
It looks great. And I do want to note before we dive into the presentation, if you want to show folks your bat mug, I think everyone deserves to see the bat mug, okay? This is the greatest bat mug of all time. Yes, we all want one of these at the end of the broadcast. I don't know where we'll get them. We'll talk to you about that. But let's dive in with your talk and take us away.
Yeah, so let's go, Batty. All right. So one of the things I always like to start with is when we think about bats, we tend to have a very sort of specific image in mind, right? The kind of black with red eyes, with big scary teeth, like maybe a little bit creepy, Halloween, scary movie type bat. But it turns out bats are actually incredibly diverse. So just something to kind of think about, a question I'm going to pose for you, we can all take maybe 15 to 20 seconds to think about it, is how many different species of bat do we think is in the world? So if we were to go around the planet and tally every different type of bat species, the types of numbers that we think there would be. I will say, keep in mind, there are about 6,000-ish species of mammals, of which bats are mammals. So that's sort of the maximum you can go.
If people want to put their answers in the chat too, by the way, so on StreamYard, you can put it in the chat. On YouTube, you can put it in the chat. We can take your thoughts for this. Anyone have any idea number of bats?
We'll give it like a couple seconds.
Couple seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe we've shocked them. There's too much for them to know offhand. I will note too, by the way, you should probably pay attention to this. This might appear in our Kahoot quiz later. We've got 17, 126, 7,300 are answers from one class. Different answers. I like that. Okay, what is it, Alyson? Tell us.
Okay, it is, as of today, April 19th, 2022, it is 1,454 species of bats in the entire world. So that makes up about 1/5 of all mammals on the planet. And if you are a nerd like me, or maybe after this presentation, you'll become a bat nerd like me, you can keep track of how many bat species there are yourself by going to this website here, batnames.org, which is a website managed by the American Museum of Natural History. The bat biologist and mammal curator there has put together this website, and every time a new bat species is discovered and published, it goes on that website, and this number is constantly going up as we learn more things about bats. Which brings me to my other really amazing thing about bats is we have all these different species, and they are also found pretty much everywhere in the world. So almost anywhere you go on this planet, there will be at least one species of bat. The exception being there are no bats in Antarctica, but everywhere else we can find bats. So we've talked about how many there are, but I think it's always good to take a step back and think about what makes a bat a bat. So you can imagine if you are out in the yard taking the dog for a walk, and suddenly an alien spaceship comes down, lands in front of you, and out come the aliens. You exchange pleasantries, say hello, and then they ask you, we have heard of this thing called a bat. Can you describe what that is? What are some of the things that we might tell these very friendly, bat-curious aliens? So the primary thing that separates bats from all of the other mammals, so they are mammals, is they fly. So they are the world's only mammals that are capable of true flight, as you can see by these beautiful wings that they have. Now, as we said, they are mammals, so they have fur like mammals. Think of your dog, your cat. They give birth to live babies, as you can see in this picture over here of a mother with her pup. So bat babies are called pups. Most bats give birth to one pup at a time, though some species of bats will give birth to twins and even as many as 4 or 5 babies at once. But that tends to be pretty rare. Most of the time, they only give birth to one at a time. And the babies nurse from the mother, just like other mammals, often by either clinging to the mother while she flies or when they're roosting and hanging. Bats are mainly nocturnal, so they are active primarily at night, though some bats might be active while it's still a little bit light out as the day comes to a close or towards the end of the night. And they hang upside down in a variety of habitats. So bats will roost in places like caves, trees, tree hollows, among leaves. Pretty much anywhere you could think that a bat might kind of wedge itself, there's probably a species of bat that does exactly that. So those are kind of the basics, right? Nocturnal, mammal, and they fly. So I think this is one of my favorite photos of a bat, really showing what's going on in the wings. So you might notice as you're looking at this picture of a bat, that anatomy, those bones might look a little familiar. And that is because bat wings are basically bat hands, and they have the same anatomy that we have in our hands. So we've got the wrist here, little thumb. Only their fingers, instead of being kind of short like ours, have become really long and thin and have this skin membrane stretch between them. And that's what creates the bat wing that we see and really gives it that distinctive, right, bat wing shape. And in fact, the formal term for the whole group of all bats is Chiroptera, which roughly translates to hand wing. So you can see bat biologists were very, very descriptive when it came to naming bats. So another way to think about this is that bats fly with the power of jazz hands. So this is one of my favorite videos. You can just really watch and see this bat as it flies across, really bending all those fingers and flapping at the air. So we'll all just take a moment to appreciate the bat. Yeah, so power of jazz hands. However, we talk about bats as being the only mammals that fly, but one of my favorite fun facts is you guys have probably all heard of vampire bats, right? The bats that are famous for drinking blood. There are, in fact, 3 species of bat that do drink blood. However, I would like to point out that most bats and all of the bats that you would ever encounter in the United States or in Canada do not drink blood. They eat many other different things. But vampire bats have also adapted to run on the ground, still using those wings as little makeshift stilts. So just always like to put that one in there. Bats, as we kind of know of them, first appeared in the fossil record about 50 million years ago. So these are some of the best fossil images that we have of sort of these first bats, being bats that we think of now having wings, having the types of ears that let them use echolocation. They were likely active at night. So this is around when that combination of flight and echolocation really came about. So what I would like to do today with you all before we dive into questions is, as a bat biologist, I am actually mainly somebody who's interested in animal behavior and behavioral ecology, specifically how animals like bats use their senses to interact with their environment. So what we're going to kind of do is just sort of briefly go through the different types of senses that bats have, how they use them, what makes them special, and I'll show you some cool videos along the way. So bats eat lots of different things. So remember, we think of bats as being one very specific thing, but they are in fact incredibly diverse, eating everything from insects to fruit, to flowers, to frogs, to lizards. They eat other bats. They will sometimes eat rodents. They will eat spiders. They eat pollen. They eat blood. Basically, all these different bats have evolved many different ways, many different things to eat, and along the way have specialized in being able to eat those specific items. So when we think about bats, especially our insectivores, though many bats have these amazing, beautiful, gigantic ears, and hearing is a really important sense for bats. And a lot of that is because they are active at night. It's harder to see. And so being able to hear becomes really important. Add into the fact that many bats have evolved a form of seeing the world around them using sound, which we call echolocation. So like in the name, echolocation is where bats and some other animals such as dolphins and whales use sound by emitting a noise. That sound travels into the environment, it hits an object, and then that sound actually bounces back towards us, creating an echo. And bats are able to listen for that echo and use the information, such as how long that echo took to get back to them, how loud the echo was when it arrived, potentially the shape of the sound frequencies, to figure out where and how big objects are in their environment, such as insects. And luckily, scientists have figured out a way to help make it so that us humans can sort of eavesdrop on these bats, because these echolocation calls for most bats are not something that humans can hear. Only bats can hear these calls. So I have a really neat video we're going to show you, and I want you just to listen carefully as we watch this bat capturing some insects.
Super cool, by the way.
Yeah, so those little high-pitched chirps that you heard were the bat echolocating. And normally, we would not be able to hear those noises, but bat scientists are able to use fancy recording equipment, special microphones that are able to pick up those very high-pitched noises and turn it into a sound that we can hear. And what's also really neat is that different bats have different types of echolocation. So I'm going to play you just two different types of echolocation calls from two different types of bats, and just kind of listen to see if you can hear the difference. So that's one. So you can hear it. It almost sounds like a bird when we move it into those different frequencies. Now this is the second one. So you can hear that the sort of rhythm of those, the pitch was all a little bit different. So one of the ways that scientists like me can study bats is we put these special microphones out into the environment, we record the calls, and then we can actually tell what types of species are flying around an area based on these very unique calls. Oops. Okay, so we've talked about sound and how bats are using their sense of hearing. What about vision? So we have all heard, I'm sure we've all heard the idiom that bats are blind, or blind as a bat, right? So it may surprise you to in fact know that, as far as we understand as scientists, all bats are in fact able to see. How well bats see does vary. So if you look at these bats over here, on this one side, they have these really big round eyes, right? We've got these really big orange eyes. This is the monkey-faced bat. As you can guess, it looks a little bit like a monkey. This one is also one of my favorites. This is a tube-nosed bat, sometimes referred to as the Yoda bat for reasons. You can see that, but you can see that these bats all have these really large eyes compared to the bats over on the other side, which have much smaller eyes. We can almost barely see them on the bat's face. And a lot of this, again, has to do with what these bats have evolved to eat. So these bats with the very large eyes are primarily fruit and nectar feeding bats. So these are bats that are flying around looking for fruit or flowers on trees. And so vision is going to be much more helpful for them to find a plant, because a plant isn't going to fly away on them. Whereas our bats with these smaller eyes tend to be our insect-eating bats. And our insect-eating bats are more likely to rely primarily on echolocation because it's going to be more reliable at night when there's not a lot of light to see by. But I always like to point out bats can in fact see. So yeah, so fruit versus insects. This is also kind of a little bit fun. We have already talked about our vampire bats, but you might notice that this bat on top also has very, very large teeth. But that is not a vampire bat. That is in fact a fruit-eating bat. So just like hearing and vision, our teeth, or the teeth of bats or animals, can tell us a lot about what they eat. So many of our fruit-eating bats are also going to have these pretty large teeth that allow them to grab onto fruit and carry it around with them. Versus something like our vampire bat, which have very, very sharp teeth that are evolved specifically to help them feed on blood. All right, and then speaking of, so this is another one of my favorite videos. So we have many bats that are important as pollinators. And in order to drink from flowers, they have these very, very long tongues that they can stick out of their mouth and extend way deep down into flowers in order to lap up that nectar. So this is a bat doing this in slow motion. It's very similar if you've ever seen a hummingbird at a flower. These bats are basically hummingbirds of the night. So they are flying up to flowers, hovering over them, and really fast sticking their tongues in to get the nectar. And this is what that looks like slowed down. And this is always just really fun. Imagine being able to stick your tongue out that far, or like lick your ears or your forehead, right? It's wild. All right, and then finally, sort of I think the last sense I want to try to cover, and this is what I have done most of my research on, is the sense of smell. So we often don't really think of bats as having a really good sense of smell either. But it turns out they probably are very good at smelling, potentially even better than humans. And this is especially true for our bats that feed on plants like fruit and nectar, because they can help use smell to find the location of a ripe fruiting tree or of a flower that is open and ready to give them nectar. And that saves them some time instead of just having to wander around the forest hoping they find a tree with fruit on it. So I also always like to just sort of wrap up. I've thrown a lot of fun information at you, hopefully, and we'll be happy to take questions. But I always like to talk about why I love bats so much and why I hope that even if you don't love bats, that you will come to appreciate them. So one of the things is, right, they are incredibly diverse. I've talked about just a little bit, the barest tip of the iceberg of what bats are and what they do. They also play really important roles in our ecosystems as predators. They eat insects. They eat pests of many crops and plants that humans use. They are important pollinators. All of those nectar-feeding bats with those really, really long tongues are really important for helping pollinate many plants that are important to us or to other animals. They also help disperse seeds. So they are really important for helping maintain forests. And just, right, they are a piece of our natural ecosystems, and that makes them valuable. And especially in the Northeast and in the United States and Canada, as we move into springtime, bats are emerging from their winter habitat, or they are moving back to their their summer grounds. And the weather is a little bit unpredictable, which makes it more likely that bats might end up in trouble, such as on the ground or in a place where you can find them. So this is just my friendly reminder that if you do ever find a bat, never ever touch it with your bare hands. This is true for any wild animal. Find an adult, teacher, parent, guardian, whoever, to help you out if this does happen. And then that person should, either wearing gloves or using a cloth, some kind of protection, scoop the bat into a box or some other safe place and call a wildlife rehabilitation center. And you can find that info by Googling, or these are a couple websites that are really good resources specifically for if you find a bat. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and find all my things and stop sharing.
Fantastic. Alyson, well, while we're getting into questions, before we dive into, just a huge thank you for such a fun presentation. By the way, never before in a bat presentation has bats been equated to night hummingbirds, and I like it very much. So thank you for that as our key takeaway today. We're going to dive in with questions. If you're on YouTube or in StreamYard, get those questions ready. But first, we are going to join on a Kahoot together. So Alyson's going to help us out in our last few seconds of every one of these questions. Quite a few of them relate to the things she was talking about. So if you guys are paying attention, this is like a test, a fun test, and a lot of good times at the same time. So that's our game pin. Feel free to get that up, everybody. We're going to leave that up for a few more seconds before we dive in. If you're new to Kahoots, the faster you answer, the more points you get. Now, you don't win anything. We unfortunately were unable to secure that bat mug for everyone at the end of the broadcast. We'll work on that for next time. But you do win Alyson and I's everlasting respect. So I'm hoping, are any of these names bat names? No, we need a bat name to it. Rational Bat. Okay, we've got a Rational Bat now.
Yay. I love it.
Let's do this thing. Rational Bat, a lot is riding on you to win this for that kind, okay? Here we go. Let's do it, everybody. If you haven't joined yet, still have time to join. Let's dive in. Okay. Number 1 to 4. How many kinds of bat are there? Is our first question today. We asked it earlier. You guys are so great in the chat. 50, 100, 500, or over 1,000? I mean, surely it can't be over 1,000. There's so many bats. There's too many bats, really. I'm thinking 50. What do we think? So feel free to get ready that Kahoot. If you don't have Kahoot, you can share in the chat as well. I love that people are already sharing questions in the chat. You guys rock. Almost everyone got that right. 31 of you, 1,000 plus 1,454, was it? The exact amount?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. But as we noted too, bat names, where's our thing here? Batnames.org if you want to see the latest and greatest. So Blue Dolphin currently in the lead. Let's go on to question number 2. Okay. I'm excited. This is how I start my morning every day. What is a special ability many bats have? They can turn into vampires, like the full body. They can
if only.
Obviously, that's got to be the answer. Hunt using sound, fly 2,000 kilometers without stopping, all of them, yes. Or they can grow indefinitely. So you have like 30-foot monster bats. I think a lot of our group should know this one. We did talk about it. We had some cool clips. They can hunt using sound, echolocation. It is the coolest. I'm so glad you shared multiple kinds of bat too. I love it. It's so special. Okay. What are we at? Blue Dolphin still in the lead? No. Rational Bat takes the lead. You can script it. You can't script this stuff. It's okay. Rational Bat in the lead. Way to go. Okay, keep it going. What is an issue facing many bats? So, we've talked about these in some of our conservation programs in the past. So chytrid fungus infections, floppy wing disease, sounds really devastating, white nose syndrome, or lack of insects to eat. They just go out there and there's nothing to eat. There's no bugs. The mosquitoes are gone. Maybe some of you have heard of this. Well, make sure you guys get a chance to learn about this after the fact. What's our split? Ooh, very equal split.
Okay, yeah.
The most was white nose syndrome. So white nose syndrome is a thing really afflicting a lot of bats, especially in North America. Chytrid fungus is more of a frog and amphibian thing. But one of the things that a lot of scientists are working on around the world right now to try and mitigate. So I'm glad some of you guys know that. Check it out more on bat websites when you're done.
I can also expand on that too if
absolutely. We can dive in our Q&A. Rational Bat has kept the lead, Alyson. I am very, very excited about this. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Final question. Now, what can we do to protect bats?
Okay.
Don't be too hasty. Build a bat house, learn more about them, act to reduce emissions, so help climate change, or all the above. People who know my Kahoot questions will know that it's almost always one kind of answer when I ask it this way. I'm hoping Rational Bat is amongst them. I'm very vested in this victory. 4 more seconds. 46 of you. Wow, so many of you folks. All right. Most of you got that right. All the above. Build a bat house. Give habitat for bats. A lot of species have trouble finding habitats. You can make a difference with that. We see these in parks. Some houses have them. Learning more about anything is a good way to help protect it. And climate change is something that's impacting all manner of species around the world. So anything you can do to reduce emissions will go a long way to helping both bats and everything else. Here's our podium. Alyson, I'm so excited Number 3. And then we're diving in with questions. Mr. Shattuck, you're coming up first. Rational Bat came in
Yay,
third. Oh, bronze medal. That's good. But a duck won, and then our winner. Let us know who you are in the chat, if you are any of these folks, by the way. Purple Shark.
Shark.
Nicely done. Nice, everybody.
Awesome.
Well, Alyson, we're going to dive into other questions. Mr. Shattuck's class is joining us in Chalk River, Ontario. If you want to kick us off with one, come on up with me, guys. Here we are. Hi.
My question is, does climate change affect bats?
There we go.
Oh,
Next.
wow. Yeah, that is an excellent question. And I think the simplest answer is yes. Exactly how that happens varies. So particularly in the United States and in Canada and North America, some of the things that we have already started to see with climate change and its impact on bats include things like drought. So in parts of the West where there's not as much water to begin with, drought can be a really big problem for bats because they're unable to get enough water, just like with a lot of other animals. We're also seeing with the kind of erratic weather. Depending on where you are, it's April and we were like getting snow. Here where I am, it suddenly got really cold. It was 80 degrees a few days ago. So this kind of erratic, fluctuating weather can also be really challenging, especially for bats like little brown bats and big brown bats and any of our hibernating species, which have spent all winter holed up in a cave somewhere, not eating, relying on their fat stores from the fall. They're starting to wake up now, and if it's difficult for them to find food, either because it's too cold for insects or if the weather is just too cold for them to be able to fly, that again can cause issues. And that's where, especially around now, if you find bats, it's really important to call a rehabber and try to get them help as soon as possible. But yeah, so unfortunately, yeah. I will say that also, though a lot of bats are being negatively affected by climate change, there's also the possibility that some bats are going to benefit from it. Yep. We might see range expansion. Some bats maybe benefit from sort of the changes in insects. So it really depends, but yeah.
I'm really happy you mentioned that. A lot of scientists are reluctant to say when things might benefit from climate change. That will happen with some species. I mean, it's not worth discounting. The overarching story is, of course, the fact that it's changing so much so quickly. And I mean, kids, ask your teachers, ask your parents how much the weather has changed since they were kids. Since I was a kid, the weather has changed radically. And I mean, that's something that can be very difficult to adapt to. We're people, so we have the opportunity to go in houses and have air conditioning and heating and all these things that bats don't have, other species don't have, and still have these impacts on a wide variety of things. So it's a great question and a great kickoff to our Q&A. Class 63, Miss Jackson's group joining us in Georgetown. Unmute your mic, come on in and take us away. Hey guys, welcome in. But you got to unmute. Otherwise, I can't hear you. I can see you. I love your enthusiasm. But you got to unmute. It's more fun that way. The big mic symbol. Play around with it. Hi. Yes, I see you in the back too. Okay, unmute your mic, and I'll come back to you guys in a minute, and we'll take your question that way. Miss Henderson, you can let me know if you're good as well. But Miss Henderson, Andreas, question from Anata. Can bats live outside a cave? Do bats live anywhere other than caves, Alyson?
Yes, they do. So we tend to think of bats as living only in caves, right? The bat cave. And many, many species of bats do, in fact, live in caves for at least some part of their life. But bats live in tons of different places. So there are many species of bats that actually roost in tree cavities, so kind of like a tree cave. But there's also bats that roost among the leaves. So one of my favorite bats is the eastern and western red bats. They're these beautiful burnt orange gold color or reddish color. And they are actually very well camouflaged to look like a dead leaf hanging on a tree branch. Some bats form their own tents out of leaves. So the aptly named tent roosting bats, which are found primarily in tropical regions of the world, they actually will will engineer and chew their own little tents out of leaves. They're very, very cute. Look them up. The popular favorite is the Honduran white tent roosting bat. They look like little cotton balls with wings. But yeah, so bats will roost in lots of different places, and it really depends on the specific species that you're talking about.
I am going to, between our next question, get up a picture of those bats because they are amazing and they are adorable. So many questions coming in. This is great. Okay, Miss Jackson's group, you're good to go. Unmute that mic and I'll bring you back. Hey, guys.
What are the predators of bats?
Nice.
Ooh, that's also a great question. So, bats do have predators. I think the main ones tend to be birds of prey. So particularly owls can be predators of bats. Other bats can be predators of bats. So there are a few species of bat that are predators, and they will snack on other bats if they can get them. There's some specific types of other birds of prey, the bat falcon, and even red-tailed hawks, things like that will hang out near, especially really large caves that have a ton of bats, where you have just thousands of bats streaming out of a cave. These birds of prey will hang out and just hope that they get lucky. And then many other species, things like raccoons, snakes, skunks, basically any probably mesopredator, coyote, whatever, if they find a bat on the ground or if they are near a cave where bats are maybe coming out or falling down, they will definitely take advantage.
A lot of things eating bats, but I do encourage our classes, if you've ever seen like a bat hawk or something take bats, the level of flying prowess that birds have compared to bats is quite, I know we're team bat today and we're in a bat program, but it is quite, I mean, the bats try to get away. They really don't have much of a
I will have a bone to pick with that though.
Okay.
So speaking of flight, sorry, we're just going to digress for like a hot minute because
I'm excited.
Bat, Jesse.
Put me in my place. Put me in my place.
So when I was talking about the bat wings,
Yes.
one of the really amazing things about bat wings and what makes them in some ways better than bird wings is that by having those hands, it gives them much more maneuverability to change tiny aspects of those wings in response to changes in airflow or whatever. So that's where you see, we see the bats fluttering around, and some species are really good at like navigating through these really tiny things. I've seen bats, I put up a net and I'm like, the bats are definitely gonna fly into this net, and they're like, burp, 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 bye, and they just like zip around it, and you're like, ugh. So that's not always and not in all contexts, but in some ways, bats are more efficient and maneuverable flyers than many birds.
I stand corrected. We saw that in the amazing echolocation video. Like you see them maneuver and change in midair and flip that patagium up and sort of grab the moth. It's like the coolest thing ever. I promised the tent bats, so I will deliver the tent bats for everybody. And then we will take some of our YouTube questions before doing another live round. So here are Honduran white tent bats that are spectacular. They are awesome. Look at those bats. They're so beautiful and weird and fun. So I'm glad we got a chance to ring those up. Okay, Alyson, some questions from YouTube. So many questions coming in. Miss Suki's class, Sydney wants to know, what's your favorite type of bat? No pressure at all.
Okay. Oh my goodness. It depends on the day. One of my favorite bats, I don't think I saved it. You might have to Google this one for everybody as well. Is the wrinkle-faced bat.
Yes, they are amazing.
I had a picture of one on my desk for a while, and somebody was lost and came into our lab, and they went to walk out, and they were like, oh, "What is that?" And I was like, "That is a bat, and it's my favorite."
We're gonna get a nice close-up of this. Yes, look at that thing. It looks like
weird. They're fruit eaters. They have these bizarre faces. They have these wing patterns, and just, that face. They have these big, like, beautiful green eyes that does not usually translate very well in photos, and they're just so weird and cool. They're found in Central America. They're my favorite. I like the weird things, I think.
Almost no biologist can ever pick one offhand. So thank you for that. And they're very
I know like the one, I have like the whole list, but I won't subject everyone to that today.
Okay. I mean, we do another like a 2-hour follow-up program in the future. We'll bug you for that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Miss Patrick's class joining in Pennsylvania, where you're joining from today. So many great questions from them. Okay. Evelyn wants to know, how do bats stay warm when they sleep?
Oh, that's a really good one. So two ways, I guess. So bats will cuddle. They will group together and basically use each other's body heat to help maintain their temperature. But one of the things that's really cool about bats that I did not really get into and is related to hibernation and sort of being able to save energy during the winter, but they will do that at other times in the year too, is bats can actually lower their body temperatures in a way to save energy and then warm themselves back up later. So they basically put themselves into sort of this like sort of little bit of a stasis. So they actually don't have to stay warm while they are sleeping.
Cool. I tried to do that over the whole Easter long weekend. I just slept constantly. I stayed in this nice, cool basement. It was really nice. I got to say that's something going on there. Alyson, time flies when you're having fun. What I want to do is wrap up with 3 questions from our live groups. And so Mr. M filling in for Miss Henderson today. Juana in his class wants to know, how long do bats live?
Yeah. So another great question. And again, it depends on the species. The bat that we know to have lived the longest, because it was banded and then recaptured in the wild, was estimated to be about 42 or 43 years old at time of second capture. So somebody had put a band on it in the 50s, I think, or 60s, and it was recaptured 43 years later.
Shocking. What kind of bat? Like, that's a really...
that was a Brandt's myotis. The bat was captured in Siberia, I believe. But yeah, so a lot of bats will live 20, 30 plus years. They have very long lifespans for the size of their body, which is quite remarkable. And there's a whole group of people who are researching how that can help humans with longevity. How are these bats able to maintain their bodies at these high metabolisms for such long periods of time without aging, essentially?
So bats may not turn into vampires, but by studying them, maybe we can, and just get like extra. This is very exciting stuff.
That's maybe the key to immortality. It is true.
There you go. There's our tagline. We'll call the episode that next time. Let's head back to Mr. Shattuck, and then we'll wrap up with Miss Jackson's in a minute. Come back in and Chalk River, guys. Hey.
I want the Kahoot.
Nice. What's your question?
If bats can swim, how long can they stay in water for?
Ooh, great question.
So if bats can swim, was that the question?
Yeah, how long can they stay in the water? It's fascinating.
Okay, so yeah, so bats can swim. They prefer not to. But they are able to actually do kind of a little bit of a it wouldn't really be I guess you could call it a bat paddle. It's sort of the butterfly stroke where you sort of are like, so they basically use their wings and can kind of get themselves breaststroke, butterfly stroke, bat stroke, whatever you want to call it, to get them out. And they won't choose to do that, but if they somehow end up in water accidentally, they can basically swim well enough to get themselves to a shoreline. Yeah. And actually, that's quick plug for like general bat conservation and wildlife. If you have a pool, especially if you're somewhere in more of like the southeast or places where bats are more water restricted, you can get these little like floating things that will help make it easier for wildlife like bats or frogs or other things that might end up in your pool accidentally to get themselves back out.
Nice. That's a really great. I've never heard of that for anything before. That's really cool. There's one BBC series that has a bat swimming in it. It lands in the water by accident. I wish I could remember what it was, but it's really fast.
Yeah, there was a video went viral a few years ago too of a big flying fox, I think. in India or somewhere. Yeah.
Well, we're going to take one more question to wrap up. And I do want to stress, if people want to learn more about Alyson and her work, you've got a fantastic website talking about all the research that you do. You're on social media. You had that in your slide. The group that we classically mentioned for groups that want to learn more about how they can conserve bats is Bat Conservation International. Does a lot of great work, teaches you how to build a bat house and all sorts of great things. So do check that out. And remember, bats are night hummingbirds. That's your one takeaway, other than the fact that they're the key to immortality. But Miss Jackson's class, come on in, wrap us up, unmute that mic, and take us away. Hey, guys.
Are bats related to birds?
Ooh.
Oh, that is a good question. How do I? No.
Loosely.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, all creatures are related to all living animals, but yeah. So bats are mammals, so they are more closely related to us than they are to birds. And in fact, I will throw out, so you sometimes hear bats being referred to as flying rats. And actually, my favorite pet term for bats, which is sky puppy, is much more scientifically accurate because bats are more closely related to carnivores like dogs and like cats than they are to rodents like mice. So if you want a nickname, instead of flying rat, flying dog, sky puppy, much more scientific. It's a scientifically accurate nickname.
Alyson, you've given me the perfect thing to end our broadcast with. For all our classes, thank you all so much for participating. I hope you guys learned a lot and are super excited. Check out Alyson's website. And if you want, Alyson, what we do to wrap up every broadcast is we bring in all the classes to say a big thank you and farewell. So Mr. M, Ms. Jackson, Mr. Shattuck, if you guys want to turn on your camera, turn on your mic. But instead of saying goodbye and farewell, you can say Sky Puppy today if you'd like to. I'm going to. And we'll wrap up the broadcast there. All our teachers are with us now. Feel free to turn on your cameras. Mr. Shattuck, thank you very much. Guys.